MacBook microphone today.
I can use my headphone microphones. Same, no audio. Is it working now? I might just have to go with the headphones today. Still not working. Is it working now? It might have to just be my headphones today. I think my mic died on me, so I'll have to go with the headphones. Now working? Okay. All right, it's gonna be the poor audio today. Maybe at some point I could switch if these things charge up a little bit, but we'll have to get it rolling. So everyone, sorry for the snafu to start off the stream today. We are going to be discussing the tariffs that are shaking the market one way and another. There's so much volatility. It was looking really bad last night in the pre-market. It opened up bad, but then we got news of Trump and Mexico discussing and the tariffs being suspended for 1 month, which seemed to have popped the market, but I see it's after that pop, it's starting to give back a slight bit. So we'll have to watch and see how this develops throughout the day. I
know my headphones.
All right, switching back to the headphones for good now. After all of that, which should be quite a long discussion at the beginning of the stream today, we will discuss how we have another major week of earnings coming up. Palantir is the big one today. Then AMD, Google, Disney, Uber, and Amazon the rest of the week. Thank you all, by the way, for commenting. If you were hearing me or not, that's helpful. So thank you. Sorry for the mess up again. We have a story that you would have to do some deep research for, because when I was looking for it, there was almost no information from big news sources about it, and it was how Temu surpassed Amazon in monthly active users. And if you guys go on social media a lot, you've probably seen the memes of how Temu and their products are like knockoff Amazon, and how everything from Temu is junk. But maybe that's beginning to switch now that more and more people are choosing Temu. We'll discuss that and what it means for Amazon. Then I want to cover Bitcoin dropping ferociously and now coming back throughout the market today. Let me get a live look at where it's at. Everything was popping right as I was getting ready for the stream. I think I saw it around 98,000. Let's see. Yes, 98.5 right now. And it was as low as 91,000 yesterday. So super volatile. That and the Trump coin dropping under 22 big crypto happenings over the weekend. We'll talk about that and Coinbase and how George is feeling about the stock that's been one of the best in our signals for a while. Then we have Robinhood adding event contracts for the Super Bowl, which is coming up this weekend. Who do you guys think are going to win, the Eagles or the Chiefs? If I had to choose, I'd probably go with the Chiefs, who I think are going to win. And I think I'm actually rooting for them too, because I hate the Eagles as a Giants fan. But I know George, this story is sure to get his blood boiling, because he already had a vendetta against Robinhood, and this move out of them is not going to make him like them more, probably. So we'll see what he thinks about that. Then we have two stories that we may or may not go to today, depending on timing. We'll be turning it over to the model portfolio update at the end of the stream. So NVIDIA stock continuing to struggle. I saw today that AMD and NVIDIA were actually the same share price at a certain point this morning. So it's funny, after those stocks have both had their own volatile stories over the past year in pretty different directions, to find them at the same exact spot. It's kind of wild. Let me take a live look. So AMD is at 114.58 and NVIDIA is at 117 now. So NVIDIA is surpassing AMD. no surprise there. But can the market continue higher in the near term with Nvidia stock struggling, or do we need it to regain its momentum in order for the market to go higher overall? Um, it'll be interesting to see how these companies report and what their guidance is going forward with all that's going on. Mario saying Taylor Swift, Taylor Swift 5. She was at the Grammys last night. I saw her rocking a T chain, so she'll be at the game this weekend. But last but not least, for the first time ever, the majority of all trading in US stocks is now consistently occurring outside the country's exchanges in dark pools from Bloomberg. So I think that's a pretty interesting story to ask George about, if that's even true, because that headline sounds pretty crazy to think that a majority of all trading is done outside of U.S. exchanges. It doesn't sound possible, but I'll ask him about it. If we don't talk about that story today, I will bring it back up on Wednesday because I'm very curious about it. So we'll definitely cover it at some point. So what I want to do now is take a live look at the net option sentiment in Prospero for the QQQ and the SPY. They were pretty low this morning, so we'll see if they've gone any higher with this little bounce we're seeing.
Sorry, it's been so busy today.
No worries. So we're looking at the QQQ and SPY net option sentiment now. So we have the QQQ at 10, and we have the SPY at 2. So they are hanging down towards the lows, even though we were seeing this little pop in the market after we got that headline between Trump and Mexico delaying the tariffs for a month, and that calmed the market's fears. I believe he is speaking with Trudeau later today, so there's another story sure to be released there in either the bullish or bearish direction, depending on how those talks go. I think Canada so far has been a little bit more combative in these tariffs, so maybe there's potential downside risk there. Something that's interesting for me is these tariffs have been talked about for months by Trump, and it seemed like they're the main trigger for what was a really bearish opening, and the futures last night were really bad. So do you think the market didn't trust that he was actually going to do them? Were they not priced in for some reason, or why is the market seemingly so caught off guard now that they were about to be implemented by Trump?
Sorry, I'm sending out a few things. So the basic question, and I'm multitasking here. The basic question is that did the market not see this coming?
Yeah, it seems like what was very much so forecasted and talked about by Trump, it seems like it's catching the markets by surprise, but that would surprise me because he talked about it so much. So I'm wondering what's going on.
I mean, it's the thing that we constantly talked about, right? There's a difference between policy. There's a difference between talk and policy, right? And there was a lot of talk of the tariffs, right? And maybe by the time they got to policy, the market thought it would be, 5% or 10%, not 25. So I think it's always like what we're seeing is reaction to the actual policy. And I think that, it was a pretty harsh reaction. Then it turned around. I think there's just going to be a lot of volatility because, we always talk about like the institutional perspective. And I think even institutions, when things change this rapidly, even institutions like struggle to know how to accurately price the risk. And when they struggle, it just means there's going to be a lot of testing of the market, right? See how low it could go, see how high this can turn. And that's why, I've been making a lot of moves today.
So yeah, like I was saying in the beginning, so what it was supposed to be was 25% on Mexico, 25% on Canada, and 10% on China. And it looks like this Mexico one has been delayed for a month. Some of the stocks that were reacting even more so than most this morning, were General Motors, Ford, Chipotle, and Constellation Brands. So do you think autos and food companies are two of the sectors that are impacted most by this? I know we're going to talk about energy in a moment, but any company that
Yeah.
I guess has supply chains that goes, international, it's pretty
Yeah, I
rough.
mean, I think autos, because there's just a lot of like you know, that's something that like there's a lot of international trade in, and they're a high ticket item. Like that 25% or more, is quite meaningful in terms of how much it could affect that price. And then there's a question of like, retaliation, right? Because I think, Tesla's getting hit today. And, there's a question of, will there be equivalent taxes? Will less, like, because Teslas are already expensive, right? And, there's even kind of this Musk retaliation. Like, I think it was like you were telling me about, or maybe I read it, about I think there was a Canadian province that canceled Starlink, right? So there could be just like some straight up Musk retaliations to this. So I think there's a lot to it, and the market is figuring out, but it's been crazy. Like it's hard for me to get away because I'm just like, shit, do I have to hedge? Do I have to re-hedge? It's tough right now to look at this and really know ultimately how the market's going to react.
D. Curtin commented 10% on Canadian energy exports, so maybe it's not a blanket 25%. And that's interesting because you sent me something actually earlier today about how there was a survey about what Americans think the energy supply is versus what it actually is. And I think it was everybody, or the vast majority, thought Saudi Arabia was the number one, but it's actually Canada who's the number one for where we import our oil from. So, energy is the thing that kind of affects all the prices of everything that's sold, right? So if that were to inflate, that would be troubling for the Fed's rate cutting path, inflation, the economy. There's a lot
Yeah,
of.
it was interesting. Apparently 61, that thing, it was like the perception versus the reality. And apparently like 61% of our oil comes from Canada. So that's why it's like a big, and I didn't even know that, right? And it said the perception was like, we're getting it from Saudi Arabia, but that's like a small percentage. And Canada's huge. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. I mean, but we already saw like the negotiation with, it was about fentanyl, right? And we already saw with, Venezuela, I believe, that once they took migrants, that a tariff was backed off, right? So I think what makes it even harder, and why I'm just like, oh, I got to see any news event, is that I think basically what we might be dealing with is a negotiating tactic, right? And these aren't like, Trump's not that serious about these tariffs. I mean, I don't think he's serious about the impact that they could have on America, but if he's using it as a negotiation tactic, now it's going to be interesting to see, like, how much can Mexico really help with the fentanyl? And it's kind of interesting to see him, championing that so much. But I mean, if ultimately these don't last very long, and there's a substantive change in fentanyl coming into this country, I think you could kind of say job well done. But this impact on the market, it's hard. Like at the end of the day, like even if they don't happen, oh, thank you, Bob. Well, I don't manage other people's money. We paper trade. That's what makes it easier. But yes, it's very hard. And it's kind of funny because sometimes people say we make too many moves, and it's just like, well, would you rather us like sit on our butts and lose money? But no, I've been making moves all day, obviously, and it's highly challenging to figure out what to do in this situation.
And you talked about the fentanyl problem there, and I think that's being talked about as the number one reason for these tariffs. But I'm wondering if there's even a secondary thing that might be the actual goal, which is to shift business into the USA that's currently done outside the USA. There was this story from the Globe and Mail about how almost half of Canadian businesses plan to shift more investments and operations to the US to mitigate potential tariffs and maintain market access. So do you think, I'm pretty sure that Trump has talked about the goal of like bringing more industry back to the US manufacturing. Do you think that's another maybe even more so. What he wants to happen with these tariffs?
Well, that's hard, right? Because there needs to be bigger changes than that. Because if you think about how much cheaper like Chinese goods are than us, like I think even if you put a 50% tariff on it, it would still be cheaper than we can make a lot of things. And now the labor practices involved in that are a whole other thing, right? But we're not going to get them to change that. So it's a question of, right? And it's kind of funny because we always talk about like, oh, well, other developed nations have, socialized healthcare. And that's not for us, but we do things like subsidize oil. And, we do, subsidize other things. So it's just like, my personal opinion is anything that makes economic sense. And that's why I'm for single payer health, because all the research under it is that we'd actually save money under single payer health. And, there's a lot of socialism in this country already and around the world, right? And for me, it's just like, okay, is it something that's going to ultimately save us money? That's what I care about. And I make that point because it's just like, I wouldn't mind us subsidizing manufacturing, right? If it meant that we could keep more money in the US, right? Build higher quality products that last, right? Some of these products that are made abroad aren't really meant to be durable, right? So you're ultimately saving American consumers money if you're also making better quality, more durable products. That if you have to subsidize them to do that, I don't mind. I think the problem is that there's never good conversations around these things, and most people don't understand economics very well, and some sensationalism against certain things ends up getting in the way of the discussion of what can be beneficial economically. So I think that the tariffs are a bad idea. I'm more on board if they're a negotiating tactic and he gets what he wants and it actually works, right? Like, I don't really give a shit about fentanyl concessions if there's not a clear mark of success. But I think that if we're talking about larger manufacturing solutions, I'm all for them. But there's no way that those larger manufacturing solutions exist without significant government subsidies. But just to say, like, if you look at the New Deal, right, and that created just like generations of wealth and prosperity after, that was a lot of government subsidizing, projects and infrastructure and things like, so there is a map for it working, right? So I think all of that is important. Do I expect that to happen? No. So I generally think any of these tariffs are going to be damaging. They're going to be inflationary, but I'm willing to say if they don't happen and the negotiation tactic works and there's results, then I will say job well done.
And even though we're seeing the market bounce a bit now, what's your threat level detection at still? There's a story about how, from Goldman Sachs, about how short bets surged in January. They were rising 10 times more than the prior month, I believe. And even though we're seeing this bounce, how convinced are you that the market can just regain its footing? How much turmoil do you foresee in the coming weeks and months going forward?
Anytime funds are shorting in huge quantities, you got to be concerned, right? And there's two levels of concern, right? There's the initial level of concern that says, oh, just objectively, they're betting on it to go down, right? And generally, that's a bad sign if institutions on the whole are betting on the market to go down. Then you have the added level of concern that if there's weakness shown, right, those shorts are not just isolated, right? When people, institutions especially, short, they typically want to short more to accelerate it going down, to make sure their original shorts pay off, right? So that might even be the bigger concern, just that they're shorting, right? That especially with the weakness showing today, that over a longer term, now those original shorts are gonna pay off. And also when shorts are profitable, that frees up more money, more margin to short more out of the profits, right? So you do have that concern of accelerating downward. Now, the recovery today was good, and I think that actually shows that there's still some resiliency for the bulls, right? And maybe you saw those shorts taking profits because they realized there was that resiliency. But I'm very concerned. I'm more short than long going into today. I made a lot of moves, but I believe I'm probably still 3 or 4 more short positions than long at least. And yeah, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to see how this plays out and what's the best thing to do.
Do you think the market could be overpriced, even taking out the macro impact that we're seeing with these tariffs? Just the fact that it's rallied so much in the past couple of years. Do you think it'll be easy if the headlines go away for the market to go higher, or are we in a more difficult environment with a lot of the large stocks having made big moves, trading maybe high multiples? Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is what's difficult to understand from an economic perspective. Now, granted, there's other things. What's difficult to understand from an economic perspective is that a lot of people agreed. And if you look at, I would say the best metric is looking at GDP relative to the S&P 500. And it's at the highest level, I think, ever right now. And I say that to say that, the only thing that was making people bullish, right, was that there was going to be at those valuations, right, was that Trump was a very pro-stock market president. And he was going to pass legislation to support continued growth of the stock market. And that's where I was at. But hold on a second, right? If there's legislation of these tariffs, right, that actually scares the stock market, all of a sudden that the market is overpriced thing, that could be something that's acted on a lot more, right? Where people are saying, oh, I expect Trump to have policies that support the market. If it turns the other way, that could really create a bear market very quickly, especially if these tariffs, stay in force and there's retaliation, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think that this pause is good, but if there's any kind of sustained policy that instead of what we were expecting to support the market actually hurts it, that could be very, very bad for the market this year.
So maybe that answer is kind of, I feel like it also answers the question I started off with the stream where I was saying, he talked about these tariffs for so long. Why is it surprising the market? Maybe it's the fact that it was pricing in positive policy for the market and it's getting negative. So it's almost like a double reverse. It's not even neutral, it's negative. So big switch up from maybe what the market was pricing in for a lot of these companies. But, the drivers of the market is the big tech stocks. And I would think they would be kind of the least affected by this since they're so global and they're selling tech, not food that's, grown in Mexico. So you think they'll be hit, just it'll swoop over the market?
Well, Meta's doing well today, right? I think, and I think if you look at, some of the other ones, if you just go through the Mag 7, right? Tesla, we talked about them already, but if you look at these other things, NVIDIA, you still got the DeepSeek, right? And I think how much you price in the risk of DeepSeek probably depends on how bullish the market is, right? Because you're worried that another event with this uncertain market, another announcement by DeepSeek could be really harmful to NVIDIA, right? Then you kind of look at you look at the cloud providers, right? And they have international business, right? Are you worried that they might lose some of their international business? Maybe it be to, DeepSeek and other cloud environments, or, maybe, things like cloud start seeing tariffs. You don't know, we're attacking exports of other countries, but, tech is one of our exports, right? And if countries are going to retaliate, that could be the area in which they do. So I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of general concern. And I think you're also just seeing, like, if there is problems with the economy, like, what is a safe bet, right? We've talked about this before. Stocks that have seen their valuations creep up and might be high valuations, that could be a good thing because they could continue their momentum in good times. But the first thing that's going to get attacked are stocks with, higher valuations. And I think a lot of people thought, the Mag 7, some of the biggest companies might have been creeping up into valuations that seem high. So I think that's, why we're seeing that. But I think the perfect example is, like, you look at Meta, right? Meta is a product because it's free and it's serving ads, right? We're not necessarily seeing, tariff worries there, but something that is more of a paid product, and I think especially more of a B2B product. I think there's some general worry about tariffs.
And we have another week that's packed full of earnings. I'll list a few. So we have Palantir today, AMD, Google tomorrow, Disney, Uber, and Amazon in the following days. Let's go through a few of them. So Palantir is exciting today. I feel like after just its meteoric rise, and there's a lot of debates on it, whether it can go up or down from here. I think I heard Vivek Ramaswamy talking about how Elon Musk and Doge plans to take a technological approach to reforming the government, which sounds like music to the ears of Palantir shareholders. How are you feeling about this stock heading into their earnings after the bell today?
Yeah, I mean, Palantir is a hard one, right? Because so much of what's priced in right now, I think, is expectation of, a friendlier government deals under this new administration. So I think you're kind of at risk of, anything disappointing results, especially what's going on today, affecting them. But, I think if Tesla showed us anything where they missed and then it came charging back, just basically, like, Elon was just talking about hopes and dreams. I think he basically said, I think at one point that Tesla could be valued 5 times, like 10 times more than the next 5 biggest companies. Like, he was just selling wishes and dreams. So, I mean, I don't know if Palantir is willing to do that, but, I think we've seen that be very effective. So I'm probably more bullish than bearish. But after today, who knows? I'm not sure I'm feeling like taking on very much risk.
And then so AMD tomorrow, I think that's another one a lot of people are interested in with everything that's going on with the semi space, the AI space, and just how bad AMD stock has performed over the past several years. I think we were kind of early at questioning the performance of it. We have that Lisa Su video questioning if they need a new CEO. So do you think with AMD struggling so much, is that kind of in the opposite end of the spectrum as Palantir, where they could kind of overperform expectations since the stock has been beaten up so much?
I mean, yeah, they definitely could. But I mean, I think you got to look at it like, if people are worried about NVIDIA with these higher speeds at lower costs, right? You really have to worry about AMD, right? Because I think one of AMD's, benefits was that it's, cheaper. You might not get the performance, but you're going to get a cheaper product that, might be worth it for certain applications because you don't really need NVIDIA chips, or you could do more CPU processing, which is kind of, more what they tailor their sales to versus GPU in NVIDIA, right? But I think that however much NVIDIA is threatened, AMD is threatened more in terms of maybe just like the cheap alternative actually being like, instead of, certain hardware, it might be just that, you're kind of hardware agnostic. And maybe that suits AMD in a certain way where it's like, okay, all of a sudden they'll buy them because you can run, cheaper models. But at the same time, I just think that in this environment, you really have to be innovative. And I haven't seen a lot of innovation from them. So I would be concerned about, their innovation cycle being too long and them just being left behind.
And Uber is in a tricky situation, I feel like, with what Tesla said on their earnings, where they're planning this summer to release full self-driving in Austin. Obviously, Waymo is right on their tails or right ahead of them, one way or the other. Do you expect them to get questions about full self-driving and the market to react to how they answer those concerns and how it'll impact their business?
Yeah, I mean, the self-driving car thing is a huge like, and I think that's why it was important for them to like have the division, but they kind of like went in like a profit-seeking mode. But yeah, I mean, Elon Musk said in his conference call that there was going to be, you know, self-driving Teslas on the road in Austin in June, right? And I think like obviously it's what we've talked about. If those tests go well, and that's what he said himself, there could be a lot more very quickly, right? And that is, you know, especially when you talk about XAI, you know, especially when you talk about like handling payments, and maybe you know, maybe they're going to come for Uber Eats business just like directly in these, you know, automated Teslas, or, you know, who knows? There might be something bigger planned, and obviously Amazon is in that as well now. So and Amazon does have like the infrastructure to deliver, you know, whatever it needs, and could easily add, you know, restaurants or whatever. But yeah, I think there's an existential threat to Uber, and I would not invest in them with, you know, with what Elon Musk was saying, and with, you know, what we expect, I think, to be a very friendly regulatory environment for self-driving cars.
And speaking of Amazon, I found a story about them that I found interesting, and they also have earnings this week. But it's a story that's not very easy to find because almost no major news outlets covered it. The story is that Temu has now surpassed Amazon in monthly active users, and I find that funny because there's a whole social media meme that goes around about, you know, how Temu sells knockoff items and it's the knockoff Amazon, and now it actually has surpassed them in monthly active users. Kind of crazy. Does Amazon have a real competitor? We covered how they were launching that like low cost service a while ago. Seems like it's now or never for them.
Yeah, I mean, no one's gonna be at like, Amazon's dominant in what they do, right? The fact that people are buying, that there's another like low cost thing, like, you know, more people on it. There's a lot of people in China, right? And Amazon, like, you know, what they do in terms of selling goods, they're so entrenched in the US that, you know, I think there could be some threat, but it's just like not a significant one. And what you always have to remember with Amazon is they're branching out into all these businesses. They're always expanding. So, you know, the truth is they might not even care that much about the low margin business that Temu does. They're selling cheap stuff. The margins are really low. They might increasingly say, hey, we've got all of these other, you know, profit centers. AWS is an amazing profit center. You know, maybe healthcare is a better profit center for them. They might say, you know what, we don't necessarily need to be dominant over these cheap goods. We have, you know, tons of other goods. We have higher quality ones. And maybe we just like, maybe they don't really care that Temu is like basically coming for their lowest margin business. They might say that, like, you know, we got all this other stuff. We weren't making that much on it. Especially with the fast shipping, you don't necessarily know what they might be. You know, they might be, I doubt it at this point, but you never know. On some of the low margin stuff, they might actually be losing money on it to like get you to buy other stuff. So without really knowing the economics, they don't know. But, you know, I'm not worried about Amazon. I think, you know, they have such a foothold on especially like the American consumer that I just think that there's no way to undervalue that part. And I just, you know, I'd be interested to see the breakdown of Temu, you like customers in China versus the US, because at the end of the day, Amazon's not really going to penetrate into China, you know. So China is a bigger market. So those user numbers, it might be skewed just on the fact that like all of these people are using Temu in China and nobody's using Amazon, right?
And Temu is actually owned by Pinduoduo, so PDD, if anybody's interested in checking them out more. A question I have about this, kind of zooming out a bit, is just, the broader innovation that's going on in America and China. It seems like throughout history, people have always said, America is the most innovative, but now we have TikTok becoming the most popular social media. You have competitors to Amazon, this DeepSeek story. Is there a real concern that America is losing its innovation lead in the world?
Absolutely. Right. I think and even if you look at BYD in terms of the electric cars, that came on so quickly. And yeah, I mean, I think you have the entrenched huge companies, right? Like the Mag 7 that, still are just so global and huge. And, there's nothing quite like that in China in terms of the amount that's sold internationally and the power and the data. However, right, I think this DeepSeek thing is it could grow to be a legitimate threat. Like the first thing that really is that global product that wins. And if the question is the thing about China and innovation that we really have to see, because maybe at the end of the day, a lot of people say, TikTok is CCP grade AI, right? And that's kind of the unknown, right? Because I really think what America does well in terms of innovation is, there's upside, right? You're an entrepreneur and you can really, make a great life for yourself. There's not that kind of mobility in China. So there's not that same incentive to incentive structure. However, right, if some of that gap is being made up by the government supporting innovation, helping to build good technology for these companies, maybe China's tech industry supported by the government can match. Now, that's not considered classic innovation, right? But at the same time, we are starting to see, and whether the rumors are true, obviously the government is heavily involved in industry, right? So when people say government grade AI is going into TikTok, right? It's believable, right? Hard to prove one way or the other. I don't think anyone's going to give you the real answer. But yeah, I think that innovation, America's still got a better environment for it. But if innovation is being supported by the government in China and they have such superior technology, which we have, which all evidence say they do, that might close the gap and we might start seeing a lot more of this happen.
And speaking of innovation, we have Robinhood announcing a new update in their app. So they are going to be launching Super Bowl event contracts, Chiefs versus Eagles. We got some votes in the very beginning of the stream for who people think are going to win. But how do you feel about Robinhood? They obviously did that thing where you could bet on the election. Now they're adding this basically the same thing for the Super Bowl. How do you feel about a brokerage doing this type of stuff within their app?
I feel horrible about it. It just the first thing that's an issue is it just you're kind of removing the idea that you're not just helping people gamble when you're literally helping them gamble. A lot of what they said about, these are investments and, we're helping people get access to investments, right? But when you cross over into just letting people gamble on things, it's very clear that all you want to do is just take advantage of people's gambling instinct. Then there's the other thing that, they're just doing what they always do, right? They're opening the door to let people make markets on anything. These hedge funds, they're probably making markets, passing them the lines, whatever, and just opening up more avenues because they're all hooked into Robinhood to just have hedge funds, extract more money from everyday people to themselves. And Robinhood, lets them front run. They let them do all this stuff that just facilitates that. So the more we see this, the more I'm just like, why would anyone use Robinhood? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's the question, because Robinhood announced this, and it seemed to be a positive reaction, at least from what I was seeing. So I don't know, maybe the norms of the investing world and where society is, it's flipping a bit, and the lines are being blurred between investing and gambling. I guess I wouldn't think in a good way, but it seems to be happening whether we like it or not.
Well, people want to gamble, right? And so I think that's why they're happy. But like, I think you got to zoom out a little bit and say, well, we might want to gamble, but who's this serving in the end, right? And that's what I'm saying. It's taking advantage of people's gambling instinct, which is sad, because I think one of the reasons that people gamble is that the world can be a pretty dreary place for a lot of people, and getting some excitement, especially as things get worse, and getting some excitement from gambling is something that people make them feel more alive and whatever. So it's sad that these same structures that extract wealth from people and just concentrate it further and further in the top, make people's lives work, and then in turn that makes them gamble more for them to perpetuate that problem, extract more money. So it's like, it's sad, when people opt into it. I get why they do, but if people don't wake up, the problem is just going to keep getting worse and worse.
And so Robinhood, I mean, even its name, its mission, seemingly when it was started, was to like shake up the system, give the power back to the people. But it seems like, and they attracted a lot of users and people by like having that mission. But now that they have all those users, they're kind of extracting the wealth from them, and that's how this company continues to make money and go higher. So it's kind of the opposite of the goal of what they initially started and the company was named for, Robinhood.
It's all marketing. It was an original scam. Then the scam got found out when people, they've been fined by the SEC, and obviously they do things like halt trading. Like, everybody should know that it's a scam, but some people want to believe the scam. The scam is easier, and it's easier to they make investing easier, and people like easier, but they shouldn't like easier. They should be able to zoom out and say, well, this is easier, but this is just facilitating easier extraction of our money at the end of the day. And that's why it's so easy, because it's being, the product, the interface, that's all the stuff that makes it easy is being financed by the institutions that want it to be easier to take money from you.
So heading into this year, Coinbase was one of the probably the number one in our signals overall. So I wanted to bring back up the crypto space, since there was a lot of volatility. We saw Bitcoin plunging below 100K all the way down to 91K last night. It's back up to just below 99 right now, so recovering a bit. We have the Trump coin, which peaked at over $75, falling to as low as 17. It's at 18 right now. So how are you feeling about the crypto space with this? We're seeing tons of volatility in the market. I'm surprised, to be honest, that there's not even more than we've seen so far in crypto.
I mean, it's hard. I considered getting out of all my crypto this morning, and I'm glad or all my Coinbase this morning, and I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, it's a really hard situation to look at, because we always kind of say, and I actually want to check Coinbase in the signals. I haven't checked it today. Back up to 100. Yeah, I mean, we always say that the problem with cryptocurrency is there's non-transparent option markets, but it's nice to see Coinbase at 100, that option sentiment, right? But the reason that I held is the same reason that I got into it at the beginning. It's like, I feel like there's a lot more good news events coming in the Trump administration for it. I'm a little surprised it's getting hit so hard on kind of like, tariffs are not really, crypto news, right? I think it's just it's a risk asset, and people get generally fearful and start to dump it, right? Which is, a concern, right? But I think ultimately it'll probably be hard for me to ever get rid of all of my positions when it comes to Coinbase, just because, you never know when there's going to be a good announcement about it in the next, coming years. So there you go.
So we talked about NVIDIA a bit before, but I had a question about whether the market can actually even go up if NVIDIA continues to struggle, or if NVIDIA will weigh the whole market, since the NVIDIA story is kind of like the guts of what is driving this market higher, in the fact that AI and innovation and all of that expansion coming from that technology. If NVIDIA itself can't regain its momentum, do you see the market struggling? Is it as easy as that, as looking at that one stock?
No, I mean, because I think the DeepSeek threatens NVIDIA more specifically than almost anyone else, right? So I think what we're seeing is residual concern, and it's legitimate concern, right? Who knows what the next news story is? Like, what if crowd was on? I did a momentum score run today, Jonathan, and it was on top. So I was just basically, I wanted to take more tech shorts. And so I said, let me take one. I took 2 tech shorts and 1 long, just to like kind of spread out my risk a little bit. But yeah. Oh, and he was asking about CrowdStrike. But yeah, NVIDIA is kind of a really tough one right now because they do have that direct threat. And honestly, I think if we didn't see the tariff news, we could be seeing the rest of the market up and NVIDIA still, down and neutral, just because I do think that like what's going on with NVIDIA is different than tariffs. Like the tariff news is going to make it get hit because there's concerns about NVIDIA, but they have to have an answer for DeepSeek, right? And the hard thing about that is they are running, like their whole thing is the fastest compute, right? Fastest, most efficient for the dollar, like that kind of thing. But if the demands of compute are going to be less, right, it is kind of tough for them to have an answer. Granted, I don't think that's proven out well enough, right? And that's just one LLM, for example, right? But people are taking it seriously because it could be a lot more meaningful. There could be a lot of other models that you could train lightly and you don't need compute. So when I say there needs to be an answer, it's kind of hard, right? Because NVIDIA, might have a similar model, right? Let's say for argument's sake, they do. Do they want to release it, right? Because that means less compute, less a need for the faster compute, faster, more efficient compute that they sell. Now, granted, you could just say, hey, you still want the fastest compute for these lighter models, but lighter models mean less orders, no matter what kind of compute you're using. So yeah, I think it's kind of hard, right? I think that is a big event for them that they don't really have an answer for, and why I'm really nervous about it, because it's just like where it is, like some people, I think they got mad at my NVIDIA video, like the NVIDIA bulls, where it's just like, no, today, is it really changing the orders very much? No, I don't think so. But if you're looking 2, 3, 4 years down the line, whether or not it's real, like all of a sudden you have to take seriously the idea that model training just might not require the same compute. Models overall, whether it be training, whether it be, reproducing them, whatever, they just might not require the same amount of compute. And that's very bearish for NVIDIA, right? Because their whole thing and a lot of their valuation is baked into the world's going to need more and more compute. There's not even enough power to run the compute that we need, blah, 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 all that stuff. So yeah, that's a big legitimate change. And like, again, like whether it means you sell all your NVIDIA today, I don't know, but it's hard not to look at that as a concerning event.
Well, at some point it has to be priced in, I guess. And what I'm trying to ask is, when does it become too attractive to ignore? Like sub 100, I think I saw it's trading at a forward PE of 20 right now, so it's not like crazy expensive compared to what it's been at in some other tech stocks.
I don't think 20. No, I think that's wrong. I think I checked it the other day and it was like a 45.
Okay, so some bad intel, but still, the question remains: at what level does it become attractive to you, or it's just we just have to see how this tech development plays out?
I've been saying I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't touch it right now. Not long, but I don't think short either. But yeah, like who knows? Who knows if more DeepSeek news is going to come out? Like it's. I've been telling some people that have been asking me. I was like, I'd sell.
So we had a crazy video like a while back where I asked you like, could Nvidia, I forget what the actual question was, whether it was $1 trillion company or one of the I think it was maybe the biggest company in the world, and it was like 2 or 3 years ago now. Like, how low could this go? Could it go sub $1 trillion company? That I feel like, I mean, it has legitimate business and all this demand. Like, there's got to be some floor for it at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, if there continues to be more, and like, what if it's not just DeepSeek, right? What if, like we talked about, what if, like, I mean, Google also has complicated interests with their cloud, but I mean, I guess if they're selling their cloud, whatever. But like, yeah, let's just say Google, right? Let's say they come out with a lean model, right? It's not just DeepSeek, like, because at the end of the day, it's kind of hard, right? I mean, China's a bit different, but for argument's sake, like, let's say an American company comes along to like hire one of these DeepSeek engineers, and they're just like, we'll pay you $5 million a year, blah, 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 to come and like help us build our model, right? Granted, I don't know if China doesn't let that person leave or they're like in some cave or whatever, but that is just to say information does leak sooner or later, right? There's some way, there's something, maybe someone interns there and decides to go fly back to America, like corporate espionage. That happens all the time. So I think, sure, there's another DeepSeek announcement where they give more details. They talk about their customer growth, blah, 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 all that stuff. That could be there. But, also some other company could announce that they have a similar lean model, right? I feel like that's kind of almost inevitable at that point, which provides another shot to NVIDIA. And I said almost inevitable. You don't know. These things are very hard to predict. But at the same time, whether it's DeepSeek or another company or whatever, it's just like, I don't think I want to be short or long NVIDIA. I'd rather be short other chips because they don't have the upside of NVIDIA, but I definitely do not want to be long. I'd sell if I had NVIDIA today.
Well, on that note, I think it is time to do the switch over. I see the markets after that big surge of a bounce are kind of just hanging out at the same level. So it'll be interesting to see what our signals are seeing and maybe which way it's going to go from here for the rest of the day. But we'll catch up with you on the other side. And everybody stick with me because I will tell you the QQQ and SPY net option sentiment that we are seeing in Prospero currently. Mario, I see your question. We'll get to it when George gets back in here. Let me just read it for you all. If SMCI meets expected earnings, I think I could show it on the stream. What are your thoughts on the market reaction, understanding that they still have to satisfy the separate earnings reporting by late February? So that's a good question because we haven't talked about SMCI in a really long time. So I'm interested to see if George has any thoughts. It's kind of, I feel like, fallen off our radar for a while. But we'll definitely talk about your question when George comes back in here. Let me just pull up SMCI right now and see where it's at. Has it been able to find a bottom after all that drama? It's currently at 27. Its low was in November of last year at 18. So and its high, it's crazy. It was all the way up to $114. So it's a fall from grace, but we'll get to it when George gets back in here. Let's take a look at the SPY and the QQQ net option sentiment. So the QQQ right now is at 16 in Prospero, and the SPY is at 11. So that's still both low levels, but that's much higher for the QQQ than the beginning of the stream when it was at 2, I believe, and now it's back to being higher than the SPY. But still, I wouldn't say it's too bullish overall. We've had close to 2,000 people in the stream today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Sorry for the snafu with the mic in the beginning and maybe bad quality today. We'll get it fixed for Wednesday's stream. But if you could smash that like button, and if you're new to our stream, hit the subscribe button on YouTube or follow us on Twitter. And we started posting clips of this live stream on our YouTube channel as well. So if you can't catch it live, we'll post like these 5 to 15-minute clips from it. I think one from today will probably be talking about Robinhood. Seemed to be like a good topic. So yeah, look out for those in the future as well. And now all that's left to do today is the model portfolio update, which we were at 14 short and 10 long, I believe, to start the day. So we'll see how we go from here, if we go a bit more neutral or keep our short stance on the market going forward. It's going to be an interesting one. See if there's any wild moves that have happened while we've been on the stream. Let me do a scan to see if we can see anything. Actually, I'll check in on Palantir first because they have earnings. So where are they at? Palantir went all the way back up to being green on the day, but now they have just gone slightly red. They're at 82.12. So how are you all feeling if you are a Palantir shareholder? Are you feeling good or bad about the earnings today? George, we got a question about SMCI, which I think is interesting because they kind of fell off our radar. Just asking about the earnings and what are your thoughts on the market's reaction?
Yeah, blast from the past.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, you can't feel great about them, right?
It's looking decent in the signals again.
Every dog has its day, I guess.
Yeah, not a bad thing to go long if I'm hedging the upside. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Let's not get distracted by that. Let's get into where are we in SPY QQQ and option sentiment?
QQQ was at 16 and the SPY is at 11.
You're not reading today, Stephen?
I just was about to start, but I was waiting to see if we were running. So if we are looking for bulls, healthcare, communications, and energy looks like the right way to go. On the bear side, tech, consumer discretionary, and financials.
All right, let's see what we got here.
CrowdStrike has had a pretty spectacular recovery from that breach they had, huh?
Yeah. Let's see. What did we say? Healthcare? Anything else? No, I don't think we need to add a bunch anyway. All right. It's ABY. Miscellaneous. Oh, let me check this. I should have kept LNG. Yeah, I definitely should have. God damn it. Well, I think I still have LNG in.
D. Curtin's wondering if he missed the exit on Kava.
No, we're in. Look at it. It's in momentum score. We're in Kava. Yeah, I think that'll work.
If this is what we are in store for the next 4 years, I'm going to be very busy with this. Another crazy day. We'll make some adjustments accordingly. "4 years of chaos." That should be the title.
Sure, everybody's gonna love that. I'm wondering, I think.
D. Curtin saying positions are changing green to red, then back to green, back to red every 5 minutes as he's watching them.
Yeah. Oh no, let's just take a quick look at these. Okay. No big moves I want to make. All right, any last questions?
No more questions. I think just parting note, I think Trump and Trudeau are set to make some kind of announcement between 3 and 4 today, so watch out for that, everyone. But we'll be back live
Oh,
next
God.
3 p.m.
All right.
Volatility continues.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.